Today we're going to talk about compression, and in particular we're going to talk about setting the release time of the compressor when compressing a full mix. The attack setting will generally affect the sound of transients or the beginning of loud sounds in the mix, while the release setting will affect the sound after the transients or after other loud moments. It's kind of a simplified view on compression, but it gives a hint about what to listen for. If we go from a short to a long release time, then there are a few things happening. Go and get your headphones or make sure to listen in good speakers, and we will listen to a few examples. We will start by listening to short release times. So at the shortest setting, then you can get distortion, especially in combination with a short attack. It often shows up as a sort of crunchy low end or a fluttering sound. As usual, we have exaggerated the settings in order to hear what the side effects sound like. So let's have a listen. So you can hear that this is a very crunchy sound. Many compressors are designed to avoid this kind of distortion, especially those compressors that are made for compressing full mixes or buses. And that's why I'm showing this using Reaper's Recomp plugin, since it's quite unforgiving and it will do whatever you ask it to do. In general, this kind of distortion is not a very desirable side effect on a full mix, but it can sometimes be useful on individual instruments or buses, things like that. If we increase the release time, then the distortion will usually disappear and we will instead get a more intense sound. Let's have a listen. So now the gain bounces back very quickly whenever the level goes below the threshold. And this keeps the overall level up and the sound will be more energetic and more intense. But it can also sound quite stressful and unstable, like it does in this very exaggerated example. So it's not suitable for all kinds of music, and especially not when you're using this much gain reduction. But if you're using a very small amount of gain reduction, like less than 1 dB, then you can often use a very short release setting like this, as long as it doesn't distort. A short release setting with a small amount of gain reduction can often sound very transparent and keep the energy of the mix fairly intact. But if you're using more gain reduction like we do now, then you will need to pay more attention to how the music, and especially the rhythm, is affected. If we increase the release time more, then we will get some more stability, like this. The trick here is to use your musical ears and find where the release sounds like it fits the music. Because if we have too short release, then it can sound a bit like the compressor is stressing ahead of the beat. We can have a listen to that, how that sounds. Listen for how the gain is bouncing back in a very unrhythmical fashion. So it sounds unstable like it did with the very short release time, but it also messes with the rhythm of the music. It doesn't sound like it's the same tempo. It accentuates things in the music in a very non-rhythmical way. If we instead use a too long release, then the compression can sound a bit like it's lagging behind the beat. It's not releasing the gain quickly enough. Like in this example, if I increase this to, let's say, there, and we have a listen to how this makes the mix sound more tired and more sluggish. Both of these situations are often described as pumping, and pumping can be thought of anytime the compression is audible but doesn't sound musical. If the compressor is bouncing along in rhythm with the music, then it will often be audible but acceptable, like a good kind of pumping. One thing to note here is that I have seen methods for setting the release that are based on calculating the release time using the tempo, the BPM of the song. And this may work for some songs and some compressors, but in general, the timings on the release control are quite arbitrary. So it's usually better to use your ears for setting the release time. We can have another listen and compare the sort of musical setting with the too short and the too long setting. One thing to note here is that the good setting and a long setting can be quite similar. The thing with long releases is that the compressor will spend more time in gain reduction, and it will sound kind of more stable, but it will also never really come back from the gain reduction. And the compression can also kind of punch holes in the mix because it doesn't release fast enough. Another thing to consider is that many compressors also have some sort of automatic or signal-dependent release that is going on. A very common feature is, for example, that the release gets shorter for short transients and longer when the compressor stays in gain reduction for a longer time. And this will affect the sound of the compressor, and it's one of the things that make compressors sound different from each other. And another thing that makes compressors sound different are the release shapes. The release can, for example, start slowly and end quickly, or vice versa. The shapes of the attack and release will be a very big part in how a specific compressor sounds. But if you know what you are listening for, then it will be easier to find the actual settings for any compressor really, or for any mix that you are working on. And I also think it's important to remember that most mixes don't really need compression at the mastering stage, or at least not this much compression as we have done in this video. But if you do use compression, then these are some of the things that you can listen for, and I hope this video has been helpful in demonstrating those things. And to those of you who have contacted us about the monitor controller, we hope to have this out in the world at some point. We really want that to happen. At the moment, we are working with a few things that we need to fix in the current version before we feel that we can let it out into the world, so to speak. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.